Right, Huw. We moved on to you now.
Yeah.
After my hour and a half of
That's
trolley.
right.
So.
Marathon.
If you want to first of all just tell me where and when you were born.
Well, I was born in Cardiff, but my early years were, I was brought up in a little, it wasn't exactly a village, it was the outskirts of Pontypridd in the Rhondda Valley. Yes. Have you got that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Pontypridd is famous now, as far as I can make out, for its good rugby club. But as you can see, the Welsh national team's not doing very well, which is a great shame to all of us Welshmen.
What was it actually like there? Was it quite small?
Well, where we lived for the first 5 or 6 years of my life, I think, was just a sort of a small row of houses, more or less in the country, but on the outskirts of Pontypridd, which was at the junction of the Taff and the Rhondda rivers, which was the centre of the coal mining industry. My father was then managing a shop, a boot shop, and travelled up and down every day to his shop. But my early memories are almost idyllic, I think, because it was a lovely area to be. Across the road there was a field, down the bottom of it was a little brook. Up the road there was a farm, which my father used to take me to for a walk on a Sunday, you know, that kind of thing. It was, and we had nice neighbours. It was a friendly, ideal, safe place, I think. Perhaps that's the best way to describe it, to be brought up.
Was it a very big place or was it quite villagey?
Well, Pontypridd itself, kind of.
Where you were?
Oh no, a very short. It was only, you know, about 10 or 20 houses around that particular area. Yes, it was on. In the last century, a canal was built from Merthyr Tydfil right the way down to Cardiff for transporting iron and steel and coal down to the docks in Cardiff, and that canal was only a few hundred yards at the back of our house, so we could see these barges going up and down every day, drawn by a horse. So it was all nice, quiet, slow sort of life that I remember in my early days there, yes.
So that was in the mid to late 20s, wasn't it?
Yes.
What was life like then for you growing up as a child?
Well, after that, my father moved to Port Talbot, and I went to school there. So, my schooling, I remember not as acutely as Connie. I haven't got a very good memory for all that kind of detail, but going to school was quite a happy experience for me. I can't remember anything sort of going wrong, you know, or being ill-treated or bullied or scolded or anything like that. It was a nice, pleasant. I think the quality, what I remember, I can't sort of judge and make comparisons with present-day teaching, but the teachers were nice people. You know, we liked them. We had a young woman teacher. I think nearly every boy in the class fell in love with her, you know, because we used to say, could we push your bike along, miss, you know, that kind of thing.
Where was this now?
That was in Port Talbot.
So you'd obviously moved there.
Well, you see, my father became unemployed from time to time because this was the time of the Great Depression. It started, I suppose, let me think, 1929, 1930. Went right on till 1935 when sort of war preparations pepped the economy up again. But my father had to sort of go from place to place to try and find work, and we moved with him. But we always came back to Pontypridd because that's where my mother's family lived, and my aunt, my Auntie Peg, as we used to call her, although her name was Margaret. Whenever my father was out of work and we had to move, we came back to Pontypridd. And it was there that I went to school, mainly. In the junior school, I won a scholarship to the county school in Pontypridd, and went on from there.
So was your early childhood quite transient? Were you moving quite a lot?
Yes, we moved quite a bit. At one point, my father went to work in Yorkshire for a short time, a place called Castleford, which has also got a rugby team. I don't know whether my father went there because of that, but So yeah, we moved around quite a bit, and
How
my
did you
schooling
feel
was
about that?
interrupted. But I'm not sure whether. I don't think it affected me. Perhaps it broadened my outlook a bit. Through having to be in different places and live in different places.
How did you find friends though? Were you quite tied to your family?
Well, as far as I can remember, I had friends at school. I don't remember any particular difficulty, but I was the only child, you see, so that I didn't have brothers and sisters, but I had a great number of cousins whom I kept in touch with, and they used to come and visit us, and I used to visit them. Yeah, so that there was my mother was one of 8 children, and they all had children themselves. So I don't know how many cousins I've had, but I must be getting on for 20 or 25, and they're spread all over the world now.
How was it growing up as an only child at the time? Was that quite unusual?
Not really. No, I think I'm not. I can't go into this in too great detail, but apart from my Auntie Mary, who had about 6 kids, all my mother's other brothers and sisters only had about 1 or 2. I don't know whether it was to do with the economics of the times. Could only afford to have 1 or 2 children. But they were hard times for my... Looking back, I think my father and mother had a very hard time, really, because of the interruption in work due to unemployment, the recession, and what they call the distressed areas of South Wales. It was really a very, very poverty-stricken area. I don't know if you've read any of the novels about South Wales by Gwyn Thomas, famous novelist of South Wales, in which he depicts the politics and the poverty arising from the depression in South Wales.
Did that affect your life at all?
Yes, because I cannot help making comparisons, with the life of more prosperous parts of the country and the way that South Wales has been treated over the years. It was exploited as if the coal mining industry and the coal owners raped the valleys of the coal and left it with the tips, with the slags or slag heaps still there, and simply left it. And then the last government closed the coal mines and closed, if you like, cut off the biggest source of employment that there was in South Wales, and didn't seem to care at all about the consequences of it.
Did you see the poverty when you were younger?
Indeed, yes. I was part of it. My father and mother, were hard up.
In what way? What was...
Well, I mean, I can remember, coming home to do my homework. I was in the county school, had homework every night. Not like Connie, who was going out to the pictures. My father had to put a shilling in the light for me to do my homework. That was the electricity meter. It was on that level. I had to be careful of every penny. There were no luxuries at all.
What was your day-to-day life like in that respect?
Well, when I was in the county school, obviously, most of my day was spent in school, unless I was detained for being naughty and came home late, which was quite often. And then every night, I would think, there was about 2 hours homework to do. So I had very little spare time in the evenings. And I think that was true of most of the boys in the school that I attended.
Well, did you have a very basic sort of life then in the home? I mean, you said that there wasn't much money.
Yes, but we belonged to the local chapel, as they say. Not the churches were, the ungodly Anglicans.
And you were Methodist?
Yeah. Well, yes, the Welsh Methodist. It was a Welsh church, and I think both my mother's life and to some extent what spare time I had centred around the church. I mean, everybody I think of my age, my generation, went to Sunday school. So on a Sunday afternoon, that was occupied, and I was fortunate in having a very good Sunday school teacher who took a bit of an interest in me and encouraged me and all that kind of thing.
What were the sort of activities you got up to at Sunday school?
Arguments.
Those debates again, isn't
Arguments about the Bible and its interpretation, yes. very vociferous, but I mean, um, it was very healthy, it seemed to me. I mean, lads of my age came to the Sunday school and debated things. Some of them became diverted towards, if you like, the what they considered to be perhaps a bit more relevant politics of the time, joined the Communist Party and campaigned for them, arms for Spain, all that kind of thing, the slogans of the day. South Wales was highly political, you know, a bit like the Greeks, they're political. No, everybody has a political opinion in South Wales.
What about at your school? What was your school life like? You said that you were often in trouble.
Oh, by minor things, like not doing my homework, talking in class. But you see, we had a headmaster who was an authoritarian figure, Mr. E.R. Thomas, one of the, how shall I say, the grandees of the town. And he wouldn't put up with any nonsense in school. I mean, you got the cane in those days, 6 on the backside, you know, that kind of thing. And looking back, yes, he was a bit of a brutal man, but he ran a good school. I mean, you know where you were, and there was order about the place, so that yes, I mean, some people didn't like him at all. One of my great friends, who was perhaps the best scholar in the school, absolutely hated and despised the headmaster. But that wasn't everybody's experience, and he did. I mean, my father was afraid of the headmaster. I mean, I remember telling my father, "You want to go up and see Mr. Thomas sometime to ask how I'm getting on." My father was afraid to go and see him. You know, he had to put his best suit on and all that kind of thing to go up and see him. He was a very formidable man, Mr. Thomas, but I think he ran a good school. It was, as they say in the Navy, a tight ship.
It was actually, you said it was a county school and you'd had a scholarship to go there.
That's right, yes.
So it was obviously a select few people that went there, was it?
Well, yes, this is one of the sad things, I think, of the system then. I mean, I went to a junior school because we lived in a poor part of Pontypridd, and I was the only one that year who won a scholarship. But there were 2 or 3 other lads in the same form as me who I thought were either as good or as better as I was, who didn't pass the scholarship and weren't able to go to the county school, which provided, you know, a good old-fashioned grammar school type of education where you learnt Latin for a start.
Dreadful experience that must have been. I was terrible at Latin. Do you think that shaped your life in a way, the fact that you actually got the scholarship and went there rather than went to an alternative?
Well, I would think so, yes, because I mean, you couldn't get into university without having the equivalent of A and O and A levels or whatever they were, what were called school certificate, Central Welsh Board, I think it was called in those days. That was the examination. But, yeah.
That would be the phone then.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, yes, if I hadn't won the scholarship, I don't know what direction my life would have taken. It's very hard to say, but it does provide you with a basic education which launches you into a career of some sort at any rate. Whereas if you haven't that, especially in South Wales in those days, the prospect for career was very poor indeed.
Did you actually make a conscious choice to go to a university away from you?
Well, I didn't go to university till later on, you see, because when the war broke out, I became a pacifist and had to do alternative work rather than go to the armed forces.
What did that actually entail? Did you have to sort of make a declaration?
You registered as a conscientious objector, and then you were. If they thought that you were sincere about your convictions, you were given exemption from military service on condition you did something else, like work on the land or forestry, or which I did for a bit, or did something else like. I don't suppose I overlapped with Connie, but I spent about a couple of years in London with the bomb demolition squad, you know, that kind of thing, and then. as the war was drawing to an end, my very great friend and myself, we joined a United Nations team that was sent to Greece to try to help the Greek nation to find itself again after the terrible hardships that had been imposed upon them by the occupation of the Germans and so forth.
Was that a very passionate, conscious decision you made to become a pacifist?
Well, I took the view, and I still take the view, that if you're a Christian, you shouldn't be going around killing other people, and especially other Christians. That was, if you like, the bottom line. I know that lots of people, better Christians than me, took a different view and didn't have any qualms about joining the armed forces. But maybe because I was young, and as you're young, you're brash, aren't you? And I held those convictions, and I thought, I think it upset my father and mother, obviously, because my father had been in the army himself in the First World War. I don't think he would have gone again. He told me he'd done his bit. But I thought, reading the Gospels, especially the New Testament, there is a clear line there about behaviour to one another, which didn't include killing. So, although I think that pacifists like myself have a lot of hard questions to answer, particularly in view of things like the Holocaust, I think those who support, if you like, military action have got even harder questions to answer.
And that was your riding force behind it?
Yes. Yeah.
How did other people treat you?
On the whole, very well. I mean, the chapel that I went to in Pontypridd were quite supportive towards me. The minister came down when I had to appear before the tribunal to support me. My Sunday school teacher came, none of whom were pacifists, but came to support what they thought a genuine application by me. So obviously there are people who didn't approve of what I was doing, but unlike the First World War, when conscientious objectors had a very hard time indeed, were sent to prison in the main, I think it's to the credit of the British nation that there was an allowance made for people who had conscientious views about war, and made some provision for them to do alternative work, like the Friends Ambulance Unit, for instance, who were all pacifists, but who worked as an ambulance service with the armed forces, and the IVSP, which is the International Voluntary Service for Peace, which I joined, provided ways in which people could make a contribution to the community and to the effects of war without actually having to bear arms.
You say that you went away to London for part of the time. Was that the first time you moved away from your family?
Yes, I think it was.
How did that feel?
Well,
because it was during the war, wasn't it?
It was the time when the V-bombs were coming over, you know, those funny things that dived on you and all that. We went to work in East London, in West Ham. Well, there was a small unit of people there who were similarly pacifists, and the West Ham Borough Council employed us, that's what it amounted to go and deal with the demolition of buildings and houses and all sorts of things. Which
how did your parents feel about you going? Because obviously most people were going in the opposite direction, going from London to Wales or other places.
Well, yes, I should think my mother must have had a heart in her mouth, but she was a kind and gentle person, my mother, who would have never interfered with what I was doing, and similarly my father. I mean, they were very, very, how shall I say, not supportive, but understanding of what was happening. I expect, yes, my mother must have been wondering all those bombs dropping on East London.
Were you afraid about going?
Well, when you're young, you don't feel particularly afraid. I think this is the same way as Connie did. I mean, she was running about London in the Blitz and so forth, but probably didn't have any thought about her own safety. And I don't think you do with those circumstances.
What were the kinds of things you saw while you were there?
Well, we saw the after effects, I suppose. I mean, when the second wave of rockets came over the V2, these were rockets. You had no warning about that. You just had a sort of high-pitched whistle, and they landed on something. The V1s were these funny rocket-propelled planes which suddenly cut out over London and then came straight away down. And you had about 2 minutes to run away if you could see the direction they were coming from. But the V1s devastated East London, and the worst thing I saw was where one landed on top of a double-decker trolley bus and everybody was killed. That was absolutely dreadful. No, I mean, we were there. We were living in a place, an old vicarage in Plaistow, and every night we had to go to bed in bunks underneath the place, or we went fire watching. That was the other thing we had to do. But no, you didn't think of your own safety, really. And similarly, when we went to Greece, we sailed with lots of other voluntary agencies, the Red Cross people and people like that, Friends Ambulance Unit. We boarded a ship in Liverpool and were escorted to Port Said, all the time with a couple of cruisers there to protect the ship, because it was full of soldiers going out to the Far East as well, to the Near East.
What were the sort of things you were drafted in to do in Greece?
Well, it was really to sort of re-establish the fragmented society of Greece, and particularly in the rural areas where they'd had a very hard time. Although some of the Greeks didn't do too badly, especially in Crete, because the British armed forces had sent guerrillas, or I forget what they call them, field forces, to try and help the Greeks, the Cretans, to deal with the Germans who'd occupied and terribly devastated Crete. But a lot of them had salted away large quantities of olive oil in Crete, and the Germans never found it. Because it was really like money. Like if you had olive oil, you had gold. And when the war ended, Crete was flooded with olive oil, which they then exported to the mainland, and did very well out of it. But no, the Greeks had a hard time. The Germans were horrible to the Greeks. They treated them as second-class citizens, not to be considered as worthy Teutonic people. They were, a bit like gypsies and Jews and so forth, to be exterminated.
What sort of things did you see when you were there?
Well, it was extraordinary how quickly the Greeks put things together again. I remember going to a little place called Chalkis on the island of Evia, and the first thing I saw there was a Rolls-Royce car. I said, how on earth you come by the Rolls-Royce, why didn't the Germans take it? They said, we tucked it away in a barn. The Germans never found it. And it was to the great credit of British engineering that when the Germans left, they got the car out. It started off first time. Things like that. But they were terribly hospitable people, the Greeks, to strangers, Might be nasty to each other perhaps, but to strangers they were very, very kind indeed.
How long were you there for?
About 2 years, I suppose, yes. What? I used to dream in Greek.
Did you really?
At one time. I lost it all now, but...
Did you speak quite fluently when you were there?
Yeah, I mean, I could order a meal, I could argue the point and that kind of thing, but...
Dreaming in the foreign language, that's the crunch, isn't it?
I know, yes. Yes.
When you stop doing that, you've been there too long.
Yes.
What was the life like out there? What did you do?
Well, it was our job. or at least I was allocated in the end to this place in Evia, which is one of the islands off the Greek coast. And incidentally, there's another island called Skyros, where Rupert Brooke is buried. That's one of the things that stuck in my mind too. We went to Skyros to see how they were getting on. They were very hard up, really. We had to see that they got proper supplies of food and all that kind of thing. And one of them, in rather halting English, said to me, "Come and see the brook." Well, I couldn't make out what on earth it was. And we went to the end of the island, overlooking the sea in Skyros. I don't know if I've been to Skyros, it's a beautiful island. What they meant was that it was Rupert Brooke's grave, because Rupert Brooke had died on or been taken seriously ill on a troop ship in the Aegean, and they'd taken him off the ship to Skyros, and there he had died. And there is a beautiful grove of trees, olive trees, and there is a monument, and it says to Rupert Brooke and immortal poetry, and the Greeks look after it.
Oh, that's nice.
That's nice.
Think only this of me.
Pardon?
Think only this of me.
Yes, if I should die,
Says, if
there
I
is some
should
corner of
die,
a foreign
oh,
field,
Lord,
and there he
and
is,
is forever
on
in
Skyros.
And in that place shall be the great wealth. Oh, beautiful poem.
Yes.
Oh, that's
But the Greeks are good at that. The other thing is, of course, that Byron died in Greece, and I remember going to Missolonghi, it's on the mainland, very poor sort of place, Missolonghi, and
That's the clock again.
and there's a monument.
Thank you.
There's a monument there to Byron. Byron died, but he didn't die fighting the Turks, as a lot of people think. He died from malaria and contracted the fever, and so they buried him in Missolonghi, and there's a monument to Byron there. So apart from dallying with women, which he did extensively in Greece, I think, and other parts, that's where he died. But you see, the Greeks have this, and I think we have, as British people, have a great affection for the Greeks. The Greeks have an affection also for us, I think, for the, how shall I say, the memory of people like Byron, who was a sort of a marvelous. I mean, have you read his poetry about Greece?
Possibly.
You know, his poem about on the road to Marathon, and Marathon looks on the sea. You know, all that kind of thing.
No,
Absolutely marvelous poetry. Well, the Greeks read that. I think it's marvelous. Yeah.
Did being in Greece have quite an impact on you?
Indeed, yes.
In what way?
Well, first of all, to understand other people's culture and language, and how they suffered. I mean, you see, at one time there were people dying on the streets of Athens from starvation, and the only thing the Germans did was to send a lorry around every night and you know, get the bodies up and take them away. Had absolutely no feeling for the starvation that they'd inflicted upon a place like Athens. Yes, I feel like the classical basis of our civilization, which goes along with Christianity, was from Greece. And to be there and to see where Socrates stood, you know, where Plato was and Aristotle and so forth, I think it leaves something upon you which you can never forget.
Obviously, religion has played a very large part of your life.
Indeed, yes.
Are you still religious now in the same way you were?
Yes. I don't think my faith has wavered at all. The only problem in my mind is what the church does about it. I think the establishment of the churches, how shall I say, the churches have lost their nerve in recent times. They need to get their nerve back.
In what way?
Well, about what we believe, about what we have been taught, about what the Gospels say about how we should live together and all that kind of thing. If we followed the example of the Gospels, there'd be no wars. Poverty and would be dealt with. the outcasts of society would be coped with, and so forth. That's what it's all about.
Do you think the role of religion has changed throughout your lifetime?
Obviously, after the war, there was a sea change in British society. And I think the 1960s, although this has been debated enormously, the cult of youth and all that kind of thing has changed our society. And religion, or the established religions, shall we say, of this country have not been able to cope with it. It's very difficult indeed to re-establish what Christianity has to say and make an impact upon young people today who have so many other distractions: drugs, lifestyle, music, clothing, all that as I think changed enormously from the time of Connie and I's generations.
Do you think that perhaps young people feel that that the Bible and particularly institutionalised religion, the churches, doesn't touch their lives, that doesn't really understand their lifestyles?
Probably, but neither do they understand the churches. I think it's a two-way thing.
Do you feel that young people might think it repressive? Well,
possibly, because if you are a member of a church, yes, there are certain obligations about attending for worship and so forth, but there are also other obligations like, working in the community. But you see, what Connie finds with her young carers, and particularly these young befrienders, these people who are in this sort of age group, say between 20 to 30, once you give them a challenge, they'll respond to it. There's no lack of, how shall I say, inner feeling to do good or to be of some use in the world. It's how this can be brought into the framework of particularly of the established churches. Some are doing it very well. There are some remarkable churches that manage to do this, but they are, I think, in a minority.
Why do you think that church attendance has decreased so much over the years?
If I knew that, I'd be made president of the Methodist Conference. I don't know. I mean, we've got to look outwards as well as inwards. I think that's the basic thing. You see, we an interesting thing. We had a meeting here in Stevenage a few weeks ago about the Crime and Disorder Bill. Now, the Borough Council, and every Borough Council, has to provide an audit to the Home Secretary of what they can do about the Crime and Disorder Bill, which places a lot of responsibility on the local authority to find out what the statutory services, the voluntary services are doing. So I belong to a criminal justice group of the St Albans Diocese. It's an ecumenical one. And we said to the Borough Council, look, the churches have got an input as well, in respect of the Crime and Disorder Bill. Why don't we have a meeting? So after a good deal of negotiation, yes, we had a meeting with the Borough Council. They did as well, provided the council chamber for the meeting, and we had representatives from all the churches to have a sort of symposium about what can the churches do to implement parts of the Crime and Disorder Bill, which was very fruitful. Now it's this sort of thing, you see. Until we'd had this meeting, the Borough Council hadn't thought that churches got anything to say whatsoever. They'd say, well, our duty is to say what's the statutory service is going to do, what's the voluntary sector going to do. Hadn't thought about the churches. They are now aware that there are churches in Stevenage which are doing quite a good job in various ways with young people, like the Cornerstones thing in Stevenage, which the Baptist Church provides. So yeah, there are things going on, but they're on a small scale at the moment. But it does, I think, show that young people are not sort of barbarians or pagans. They need approaching by people who understand what they will respond to. And I think church has got to learn that. See, because if you go into most churches these days, the average age is about our age. So they become clubs for the elderly rather than places, a centre of community activity outside.
Do you think that the church still has a role to play these days, or certainly in the future?
Of course, yes. If they didn't, I think our society will suffer, as it is suffering.
In what way?
Well, I think that the dimension of faith, which means caring for one another, which in a sense is already embedded in politics, in the sense that we provide education for our children, we provide health care for the population and so forth, and we provide a basis of law and order. All this really is a religious expression in the community, but they don't. I think our politicians, I think, are sort of, if you like, basking in the culture of the past rather than the future.
So you think that our whole society is bound up in religion in a way that can't be ignored?
Yes, and people don't recognise it themselves. We find around here there are lots of people doing absolutely excellent work in the town who never go near a church, but they are doing the work that, if you like, churches ought to be doing.
And do you feel they need to gain a faith in that way, or do you think that it's enough to give in the community in the way they do?
They'd be better based, I think, if they understood properly that what the Christian faith is about, and that what they are doing really is part of it. They are doing it unconsciously. If you like, the unchurched are behaving as Christians ought to behave.
Is it then the belief in God that's changed?
I think most people have a belief in God, or some sort of God, but it needs to be refined.
Some people say that they believe in God, but they don't have to go to church. I mean, this is the common thing that people say. Oh, I do believe, I don't have to go to church. But where do they get their strength from unless they go to church, sing and pray on a Sunday? And to take up one other point Huw said, I think one thing about the Methodist churches, they're not so much around here, but they do have the Methodist Association of Youth Clubs. And that is very, very strong. 10,000 youngsters a year go to London.
How has the Methodist faith changed over the years?
Well, I think, like most churches, it's been the decline in the younger element and the middle ground, sort of the young marrieds, that sort of thing, which would normally have the energy and so forth to be leaders within the church. We seem to have lost that. Most of the people within the church now are elderly, and certainly those that are in the offices of the church, like stewards and circuit stewards and all, the usual, or if you like, in the Church of England, the parochial church council, usually dominated by older people. So, that's where we've lost, I think, both the very young, possibly because we don't encourage children to come to church, the sort of adolescents in university. When I was in university, there were flourishing Christian groups like the Student Christian Movement and so forth, which ran very high-level conferences, which were addressed by senior people from politics and the church. That seems to have disappeared from the universities.
Do you think that young people are afraid that it's sort of untrendy or unhip to show their faith?
Well, maybe, yes. But, they do all sorts of other daft things, like dressing up strangely and listening to funny music. It's no more strange to go to a church than to go to a pop concert, it seems to me. For me to go to a pop concert, I would feel uncomfortable. Perhaps that's how they feel in church.
How do you think that could be redressed?
I simply don't know. Is it
the trend of society then, you think?
I think probably there are people around who are very good at doing that. certainly within the Methodist Church we have some very good people who are working with that kind of age group, but they are on the whole a small number of people. We can't afford to buy a youth worker for every church, you know, to pay their salary and so forth. But where you do have that, and you can get young people coming in, they respond. Yeah, they find something that appeals to them.
So you think that organised religion such as the Methodist Church still has a role to play within society?
Yes, but it needs to back up a bit too. I think that applies to the other churches, but the Anglicans have the great advantage of having a bit more resources, I think, than we in the Methodist Church have, and they are able to provide some very good services in this way.
You're going back to university now. You're going back to changing tack slightly. You're talking about your university life.
Yeah.
How was that? Because that must have been in the 50s, was it? Late 40s, early 50s.
When did I go to university? I came back from Greece about 1950. No, wait a minute. 1940, 47, I think, something like that.
What was university life like then?
Well, you see, there were a lot of people of my age group there. People who'd come back from the forces. Mature people, so that if you like, the student union and all that tended to be dominated by people who'd had a pretty hard experience in the forces, or people like me coming back from the United Nations outfits. So it was a bit more mature, I think, than universities generally are, because I mean, you go up to a university normally when you're about 18. Most of the people who were my contemporaries were in the sort of 20s, you know, mid-20s even, who were doing submarine commanders or God knows what. I mean, one of the chaps who was lodging in the same place as me in Bristol had been a submarine commander, very distinguished one. I think he'd been decorated, and he said. Well, he said, I've done enough work shooting torpedoes at boats and all that kind of thing. So he came to Bristol to do a youth leaders course, and he did very well, this chap. And the last I heard of him, he was the head teacher of one of the community colleges in Cambridge. He'd been a submarine commander, you see, and it produced people like that.
Students these days get a very bad reputation. They have got and they're often looked upon as troublemakers, or people that just go out and get drunk, have wild parties. Did students have the same? Students
since George's time have had that sort of reputation, haven't they?
Was it the same in the 50s too?
Well, I don't remember lots of bashes of people getting drunk. There were a few, yes, there were a few, or going off with girls when they shouldn't be doing their work. But I don't know whether you know Bristol at all. But on the Clifton Downs, there is there's a telescope there, where if you look through it, you can see all that's going on around the Clifton Downs and so forth. And I think some of the dons used to go up there to see where their students and what they were up to, were sort of slogging on the But anyway, yes. No, I had a good time at Bristol. Yes, I'm very grateful to Bristol.
What was your average university life like then?
Well, lectures, but I belonged to the Socialist Society, which was, I suppose, the most radical of the student groups at that time. The SCM, which was very good, but also Bristol had a cultural life of its own in the city. I mean, one of the things I remember is going to the Colston Rooms to listen to a concert by the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra. What was the name of the famous conductor on the Berlin Philharmonic?
Oh yeah.
Anyway, it was the first visit of a German orchestra to Britain after the war. They'd been to London, they gave concerts, they came to Bristol, and they gave a rousing performance of Furtwängler, that's right, who had played before Hitler as well, you see. And they came and they gave a very good. I mean, you could go to concerts like that in Bristol. You know, it was a cultural centre. The Theatre Royal in Bristol put on absolutely marvellous productions. So apart from the university and what went on there, and I lodged in a small settlement in Knowle West, which is one of the crime-ridden areas of Bristol. If you say if you lived in Knowle West, you wouldn't get credit in any of the shops in Bristol, you know. But there was a good deal going on there by way of social work with young people and all that kind of thing.
Now, crime is the direction that your career took, wasn't
Yes,
it?
yes.
How did that happen? How did that come about?
Well, when I finished at Bristol, I was wondering what to do. A friend of mine joined the probation service, and he said, "Why don't you apply as well?" So I did, like Connie, went through the, the Home Office probation training, and was appointed to the East London Juvenile Court.
What was the probation service like at the time?
Well, I don't know whether you know much about the history of the probation service.
Not a great amount, though.
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, Connie's pointing out to me that George Thomas, who was, the Speaker of the House of Commons, he lived not very far from me in South Wales, and I went to a meeting of which he was addressing in Cardiff soon after I came home from Greece. George had been lost in the mountains of Greece for some reason, I'm not quite sure. So I went, and after the meeting I went up and spoke to George, told him I'd heard about his troubles in Greece, and I'd been there as well. And he said, "Come up and see Mam." That's his mother. Don't know whether you know about George's Mam. She was the sort of dynamic figure in the Welsh Labour Party. Nothing happened in South Wales unless Mam agreed to it. So I went up and had tea with George on Easter, Good Friday I think it was, and George helped me to get a grant, show me the ways in, to get to university. This is how I got into Bristol.
Uh-huh.
So I'm always grateful to George. Some people didn't think too much of George in some ways, but he's a nice chap. But what was I telling you about?
You were talking about the probation service. I was asking you what
well,
it was like at the time.
Probation service started as a voluntary society staffed by people who called themselves missionaries and who had been appointed by the Church of England Temperance Society, the Catholic Society, Vincent de Paul, wasn't it called? The Jewish Society.
Again, the religious foundations, and that's most things that stem from this country.
That's right, yes. So they were all called missionaries. When I first went
Police
to
court missionary.
when I first went to Toynbee Hall, there were some of the people there who were still called missionaries. Where's the missionary? They used to say, not where's the probation officer. But it was made a public service at about 1907, I think, and then it was made the responsibility of the Home Office, whereas not. But there was a feeling about it was a comparatively small agency, probation service, and as Connie said, wherever you were in the country, if you called into the local probation service and said who's anybody at home kind of thing, you get a big welcome. The only thing was, I remember Connie and I went to Cromer on one occasion, and I said I'd like to go in and see the local probation officer, so I went in, and the receptionist said, "Okay, I'll get Mr. So-and-so." And he said, "There's a man and his wife down here, want to see you." He came down looking absolutely appalled. He thought he had a matrimonial case on his hands, because we used to do matrimonial counselling at one time. It was a big part of the probation service. In fact, it was considered to be a status symbol to do marital conciliation, And this chap thought he'd had, by God, what have I got? But no, if you were short of £1, you could pop into the local probation office and borrow it, and you'd questions asked and that kind of thing. It was a camaraderie. Mainly because, we thought we were all against, if there's one thing we were all against, it was the Home Office. There was a kind of cult in the probation service that anything that came from the Home Office was no good.
That's funny, when I was at Nottingham, I wrote to Gareth Clattenbach, because he wrote and asked me how I was getting on, and I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "But I feel absolutely awful. I've had a terrible row with the Home Office." And he said, "You'll go far, my dear. All the people have a good row with the Home Office."
What was the kind of role you fulfilled in the probation service? What did you do?
Well, in East London, it was mainly dealing with juveniles, supervising juveniles. But perhaps the most important role that the probation officer had to fulfill in those days there was providing reports to the magistrates before they sentenced young people. They wanted to know what was their background, what was their education like, what was the family circumstances, what was their attitude too, to what they had done and all that kind of thing. So before the magistrates sentenced anybody, they used to insist on having a social inquiry report. And that guided them in their sentencing. I mean, they wouldn't always follow the recommendation that the probation officer made, but they would take it into account. They say, well, look, let's have a look at what the family background is, how supportive it is, or whatever. And very often, the magistrates would say, well, this family needs a lot of support. Could you go and see the family service unit, get them to do something to help the family along? Or even if it was money, the court had a poor box, which is a funny name, isn't it, a poor box?
What was that?
Well, it was a sort of fund which the court had, which was subscribed to by, I don't know who really, but it meant it was at the discretion of the court to hand out money. So, I mean, if some lad came in very tattered clothing, they'd say, look, Mr. Rees, go and get him a new suit or something, that kind of thing. So it was a sort of a caring job as well as a punitive thing. I mean, Basil Henriques didn't like some things that happened, and he was very.
He was the magistrate.
Yes, he was very hard in his sentencing, but because they used to say to me. Somebody was coming up in court, they say, who's on the bench this morning? Not Henriques, is it? Because Basil was quite severe.
What were the types of cases you dealt with?
Well, everything from minor pilfering, burglary, grievous bodily harm, everything, yes. But thieving, I think, was perhaps the biggest. Thieving and burglary. But it was usually because of the poverty in East London, I think. I mean, you couldn't, in some parts of East London, you couldn't sustain life without doing a bit of thieving. I mean, Connie will tell you, some of her mothers used to say to the kids when they were short of shoes, go up and pinch a pair of shoes from Brick Lane. I mean, that's the way they survived. But in the adult courts, of course, it was a bit different. When I came to Hertfordshire, I mean, some sexual offences, indecent exposure, that kind of thing. I met a chap in the town the other day who was on probation to me back in 19-something, and he said to me, he said, we didn't do half the kind of things they do nowadays, do they?
Do you think crime's changed throughout the years?
Crime is almost institutionalised now, isn't it? The level of crime has gone up alarmingly, yes.
Do you think that's true, or do you think it's just the fear of crime or reported crime that's gone up?
Well, certainly the fear of crime is worse than the actual crime. That's well known. I mean, if you walk downtown, old ladies around here are very alarmed about walking out at night because they might get mugged. The chances of getting mugged is very, very remote, but nevertheless, the fear of it is great. Yeah, I think if you like, civic or civil behaviour has deteriorated. I mean, Stevenage on a Saturday night in the Old Town is almost a no-go area because of the rowdiness and appalling behaviour in the streets when the pubs turn out.
Do you think the types of crimes that you dealt with young people in the courts is different from the kind of crime that happens now?
I think so. I think there's more violence. Certainly there's more violence around, and I mean, people resort to violence almost as the sort of first thing to do rather than solving differences in any other way. Yes, I think that's probably it. No, I mean, since my time in the probation service, I think the job of the probation service has been made much harder. They're expected to supervise far more hardened and persistent offenders than I remember.
Do you think the whole role of the law has changed throughout the years? In the way you've seen it from the inside, if you know what I mean?
Well, it's a major topic. We could be here 2 or 3 days over this. I think, you see, we've become a richer country in many ways, I think. We're not short of money in this country. It's the distribution of it that's the problem. So therefore, people who are termed the underclass these days feel themselves at a far greater disadvantage. There's a much bigger gap between the lower levels of society and those that are doing all right. And when you see all the gadgets and so forth that are available these days, that children want, they expect a television in their bedroom, they want a mountain bike. Now nearly every parent who wants their kids to get on has got to buy them a computer, all that kind of thing. So that kind of gap, I think, was not as great, say, in the 1950s, 1960s, as it is now. And it has led to well, also increasing crime. People, if they want something, they go and get it. They go and do burglary, they smash shop windows, pinch cars.
You said that you obviously worked in the probation service in London,
yes.
And as your wife had said earlier, you worked up in this area too.
Yes.
Was the types of cases you dealt with very different?
Well, yes, because here I wasn't only dealing with juveniles, it was adults as well, yes. And there was quite a bit of what they call matrimonial conciliation as well.
What, was that like a sort of a relate counsellor kind of thing?
Yes, yes, yes.
That was before the...
Yes, yeah, we were spent on special courses for that, yes. How to deal with marital problems. Yeah.
I bet you came across some nightmares.
Well, yes. I always remember a chap in Cheshunt, I think it was, wanted me to go and see his wife because she didn't like his sexual habits, you know. he liked fancy sex, but she didn't.
What did you say?
I forget now.
Did you have to go and deal with it?
No, I think I said, no, mate, that's not for me.
What were the sorts of things you were supposed to deal with then?
Well, mainly petty quarrelling. You know, couldn't stand each other, that sort of thing.
Remember the father came into court because your child was in need of care or protection, and Basil said to him, have you given your child any sex education? And he said yes. He said to his daughter, don't I tell you, every time you go out, keep your legs crossed. And that was her sex education. And that was actually said in court. He told his daughter to keep her legs crossed.
Like keep your legs crossed,
sex education.
Yes. No, I think, I think the whole art, if you like, of marital conciliation is a very skilled one. It is the most difficult thing to do. And most of us were sent on special courses down to the Tavistock Clinic or somewhere like that for it. And one has to be very careful indeed, you know, of falling into the trap that it's all one person's fault, you know, it's either the wife's fault or the husband's. But it's a question of the relationship, and some people are perhaps too immature to cope with that sort of relationship.
And you had to deal with this as part of your job?
Yes.
You know?
Well, people used to come to probation service. Well, how it started was that before the First World War, women used to go to places like Old Street Magistrates Court and complain they'd been beaten up by their husband. And the magistrate and they would apply for a summons then for assault. And the magistrate would say, go and see the probation officer first. That's how it started. But apart from going and telling the husband, you know, give him a good telling off or something like that, I mean, that's not very skillful. It's looking at how the relationship has deteriorated. What is it due to? Lack of money, too many kids, simply incompatible temperaments or whatever. You know, you've got to first of all make a sort of diagnosis of what's the trouble.
Obviously, that's a completely different role to now.
Oh yes, they don't do any marital conciliation now. No, the probation officers nowadays are implementing punishment in the community. This is what the Home Secretary wants done. Yes.
So your job now would be, from when you started, almost unrecognisable.
Yes, yes. I don't think I'd be very comfortable in the probation service nowadays with what they have to do. I mean, they are asked to do almost the impossible to prevent reoffending. Well, you know, apart from being with somebody 24 hours a day, I don't know how you do it. I have admiration for those that take it on.
You obviously, your wife was saying that you actually met in court.
That's right,
What
yeah.
was the scenario then? How did that happen?
Well, you see, she came to the juvenile court from South London, and I was living at the Oxford House at the time, and we were meeting over coffee, and she said, "Oh, I know the Oxford House." So that's how it all started. So she started coming to have supper at the Oxford House, and it didn't last all that long, did it, Con? No.
Yeah.
She had to get rid of her boyfriend. I had to get rid of another girlfriend, I believe.
I had a boyfriend, and you see, the thing was, I had tickets because it was the opening of the festival hall, and I had tickets for all the festival concerts with this boy. And see, I had a boyfriend for every occasion when I was young. I had one to go climbing, mountaineering with, one to go to the opera music with, one to go to church with, and one for something, or rambling, I think it was. So I had a boyfriend for every occasion. And so what happened is that the boyfriend that I had to go to the festival hall with had 12 tickets for all the inaugural concerts, Toscanini was conducting. And then I met Huw, and I thought, oh, you know, this is different, you see. And I want to get with all these different four boyfriends.
Outrageous behaviour. And what about your girlfriend? You had a girlfriend at the time.
Irene.
Yes,
Irene.
yeah. I had to finish off with her anyway.
And then you
And
got
then what we had to do was to separate the tickets.
I don't think
I gave him 6 of my tickets, and he gave me 6 of his, so we went to 6 concerts.
No, I didn't think I could juggle two.
So how did the people in the profession take it? Because interwork relationships
can I
are
tell-
never a great idea.
Can I tell you, see, our senior, a very nice lady called Rosemary Braithwaite, I didn't know what was going on. You see, it was a great surprise when I told her. I said, Connie and I are thinking of getting engaged.
He kept
She
it very
said,
quiet.
didn't know what was going on, she said. But she said to me, you'll have to go and see Basil. That's the magistrate, you see. So, yeah, I had to get Basil's blessing before I could get married. But, no, I mean, apart from the Oxford House group, I mean, the probation service was a nice, friendly, sort of sharing comradeship, sharing. I mean, you'd consult one another about cases and so forth. You know, it was a nice place to work.
Now, obviously, after you got married, as your wife had told me, you actually moved up here.
Yeah.
What were your first impressions of Stevenage?
Well, obviously, it was very different. The court situation was different. Magistrates were kind of local people, very worthy people, but I felt that the juvenile court, as I'd seen it run in East London, was the model, you know, that should be followed everywhere. And of course, it wasn't. People ran it in different ways. And of course, I mean, having to visit people in the countryside and all that kind of thing. I mean, and I tell you what, there was a youth up for stealing women's underclothing off the clothesline, you know. And I went to see the mother, and she said, "Oh, Mr. Rees, my boy would never do anything like that." I mean, it was that kind of thing. And then I remember a father said it to me. I'd been there to do an inquiry about this lad, and he said to me, "All this," he said, "gets on my tits." And the other boy said to him, "You haven't got any, have you, Dad?" And the other boy said to him, "No, but he's seen plenty, ain't he?" I mean, that's the sort of thing.
What on earth did you say? I didn't know what to say.
Well, I got a good laugh. But no, that was the kind of situation you'd encounter, you know.
Me in court. When I was in court on a special case, which I read.
Oh, yes. Connie had to go to a panel to deal with truancy, people done at school. And she went in, and one of the magistrates, there were 3 magistrates there, one of them was a fellow called Joe Baker, who was the senior steward at the Methodist church that she'd gone to all her life. And as she went in, Joe was sort of very, how shall I say, not a starchy bloke at all, very informal. He says, "Watch out, con," on the bench.
And I went in with my briefcase and all very formal. And he said to me, "This is okay, this is our con from the chapel. This is should be okay here today." And I was sitting there, oh, you know.
But I think he said to her, "Watch out, con." I
Watch
mean,
out,
he said, "Good morning, your worship."
Other than the criminal side of it and your job side of it, what were your first impressions of Stevenage as a town? Because you came here right at the start, as your wife
we
said.
were, yes, apart from being in the probation service, we were involved in all the activities that went on. Because as Connie said, you know, there were so many things that needed to be done, ask questions of the Development Corporation and all that sort of thing. And the campaigns that we were involved in to keep the town centre pedestrian, to save the valley, which they wanted to build on, and, you know, all that sort of thing. And I think the Development Corporation were a bit taken aback because they were professionals, the planners and all that. Thought they knew how the place should be run. I was surprised to find that it was a bunch of pretty intelligent people in Stevenage who wanted to know what's going on. You know, as Connie said, you could get a committee together in 5 minutes, more or less, in Stevenage in those days. Yeah, we did a bit of plotting, a bit of guile. Things were leaked to us from officials in the Development Corporation. You know, they said, "Look, this is going on. You know, you ought to know this." So when next we had a meeting with the Development Corporation, you know, we had all the facts and information at our hand.
Do you feel that you were instrumental in a way in helping shape the town?
I think so. Yes, I think so. Because in the end, the Development Corporation were quite intelligent in themselves. They thought they realised, look, there's a bunch of people in Stevenage that really have got something reasonable to say, and they used to listen to us.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the general manager, what was his name called?
MacDougall.
Was a very nice bloke, ex-army officer, very good at sort of, you know, organising armies and fighting battles. I can tell you what happened. In the early days, the builders were a bit irate about something, I forget what it was, and they all marched up to Aston House, which was a big manor house on the outside of the town, which the Development Corporation had got as a headquarters. Well, I think the general manager thought the revolution had come. He sort of saw these fellas coming up marching. But they were very reasonable. I mean, they had a good case to give to the general manager. He dealt with it. Problem settled. So from then on, I think they realised, you listen to people in the town, they've got something sensible and intelligent to say. And a lot of things that have happened in the town subsequently, like they wanted to build a lot of high-rise flats in the town. Well, thankfully, we've only got 2 or 3, but we cut that short. And all sorts of things like that, you know.
How did you feel when you first came here, though?
Well, it was a big adventure. Really, it was. I mean, there'd been nothing like it, I think, perhaps since when? Since, who was the one? Thomas More's Utopia. I mean, you know, everything was new. Everything was up for debate. I mean, we had these lovely cycleways, we had open spaces, good quality housing, low density housing, all that kind of thing. Yeah, we
You travelled quite a lot yourself beforehand, hadn't you? You've been around, you've been from South Wales to Bristol, and you say you travel a lot as a youngster, and you've been abroad, and you've been to London. How did this compare?
Well, yeah, it's a good point. You see, a lot of people in this area here, Bedwell, were, how shall I say, ordinary, good, working class people who, I think, whose boundaries were confined to having lived in London. But on the other hand, they were pretty good spokesmen. When you got them to a committee, they were quite vocal, and they knew what was what. I mean...
How did you feel, though, coming in from being in a variety of different environments? How did this compare to that?
Well, it was quite different. I mean, you had to listen to people who were perhaps not so well educated, who had untrained minds, but they knew what they wanted, you know. And I think it's right to take into account those people. I don't know whether... shall I tell her about Fred Udell?
I was thinking you would say about the fireplace and where all came out for smoking.
Oh, yes, yes. When in the first few months that we were here, Jonathan, our eldest, was quite poorly from time to time. one of the defects of our house, where we lived, the first house, was that this chimney was smoking all the time, and coming into the living room and causing the baby to cough and all that sort of thing. And we went through the usual channels to try and get somebody from the Development Corporation to come and see to it, one of the builders. And I think somebody came and said, "Oh, it's climatic conditions." Anyway, we got fed up with this, and Jonathan was quite poorly. So Connie rang me up, I think, at work to say nobody had been from the Development Corporation at all to deal with this. So I thought, what should I do? So what I did, I went to the post office and I sent a telegram to the general manager, General MacDougall. I said, "Baby ill, house uninhabitable." What else did I say?
House, you said, fire smoking, baby coughing, sitting room uninhabitable. What are you going to do about it?
Yes. Anyway, so it's about middle of the afternoon, you see. Well, I got home about 6:30. Big posse of people outside our front door. There's a general manager, clerk at the works, Mary Tabor, the housing manager, and one of the planners. Very apologetic. We had it done within a couple of hours.
There was a good community spirit here, I can imagine.
Oh yes, yes.
And listen, the general manager's listed because at one time some people said to me, "Are you fed up? We had lots of earwigs. There was earwigs everywhere, earwigs everywhere." And they said, "Would you do something about it?" And I said, "Yes." So I wrote to the general manager, Mr. MacDougall, and I said, "Old MacDougall had a town, earwig, earwigo, with an earwig here and an earwig there and an earwig nearly everywhere." Or MacDougall. Anyway, he immediately saw me and told us what we could do about the earwigs. And that was the relationship with the general manager and the ordinary tenants.
Yeah. Can I tell you?
You actually rented a house, didn't you,
Yes,
when you first
yeah.
came here? How did that work? Was that the normal scenario for people that were moving
yeah.
to new towns?
Oh yes, they were all to let. There were no houses to say. The sale of houses didn't take place until, let me think, Mrs. Thatcher came into power, because the Labour Party didn't agree with having houses sold off. So it was about the late 1960s when the option of buying your house was given to people. So yes, everybody was renting. The rents there were differential rates according to where you lived, whether you had an end house or a terraced house or whatever, that kind of thing.
Did that bother you, renting a house? Did you want to buy, or was that not really a consideration?
We couldn't have bought a house, my dear. We were absolutely penniless, apart from my salary. Yeah. No.
Was that a normal scenario then, that
Oh yes.
the house buying culture really hadn't hit?
Oh no. It's only in the last 20 years that that's happened. But no, I mean, they charge you a little bit extra for this, that or the other, but that was the only differentiation. The size of the house, its location and so forth. I think didn't they charge us 2 and 6pence extra when we moved to the Dell?
House was 2 and 6, so 1 and 6.
Was that a normal scenario then, that
Oh yes.
the house buying culture really hadn't hit?
Oh no. It's only in the last 20 years that that's happened. But no, I mean, they charge you a little bit extra for this, that or the other, but that was the only differentiation. The size of the house, its location and so forth. I think didn't they charge us 2 and 6pence extra when we moved to the Dell?
House was 2 and 6, so 1 and 6 on end.
But when they tried to put the rents up, that's right, that was another campaign. We blocked up the letterboxes so that we didn't get the notice to quit, because you see they had to get the new rent in, they had to give us notice to quit at the old rate. But when it didn't come off, we didn't win that one.
How have you seen Stevenage change throughout the time? For you personally, what's been the most striking differences?
Well, it's got bigger. I mean, that's the big thing. I mean, the initial plan was for up to 40,000. We're now 85,000, I think, or something like that. So yes, the town centre's increased size. People come from all over Hertfordshire to shop in Stevenage, I think. And then in the last year or so, it's been the absolute increase in cars and vehicles. I mean, the place is chock-a-block with motor cars. See, when we first came to Stevenage, the planners had provided one garage for every 3 houses. Well, now you see some houses have got 3 cars, you know, so I think the congestion in the town is enormous now, I think.
Have the roads not been adapted in that way? I mean, obviously there wasn't the traffic when you moved here.
Some roads, yes, they've arranged to have parking spots and all. But you see, if you went around the town, you'll see that there's been some attempt to deal with the car by having rear access to the houses with the garages at the back. That's not been all that successful, but it was an attempt to try and keep cars off the main thoroughfares.
Can you see Stevenage getting very gridlocked?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it is gridlocked sometimes. When you go shopping, you come out, especially about 5:30 when the factories are finishing and everybody's coming home. Some of the roundabouts are gridlocked, yes.
How do you think you can deal with that?
I don't know, to be quite honest. No. I mean, apart from improving public transport, but most people prefer to go by a car, even if it's only, you know, a couple of miles.
Has the influx of private cars changed the atmosphere of the town in any way?
Yes, I think so. I mean, the original planners didn't envisage parking outside your front door at all. I mean, they thought, you know, if we provide the garages, that should be okay. So the vision of the town was an excellent one, but the events have overtaken it.
What is important to you about living here?
Well, because we've lived here for so long, we have a great number of not only contacts and relationships, but good friends. We would miss it. Also, I think I'm pretty serious as far as Connie is concerned. We have excellent health services. Connie gets, I think, perhaps as good treatment as anywhere in the world from our local surgery and the local hospitals. They're very, very good indeed. Yeah, we'd miss that. And the other thing, of course, was in the early days, because anybody coming to work in Stevenage automatically, or nearly automatically, received a house, we were able to appoint teachers, and some of the best teachers, best qualified teachers, to our schools. So our kids, who went to school in those early days, had, if you like, top-rate teachers everywhere. I don't think it's quite the same now. I think perhaps that isn't the case now, but certainly the teachers that we remember who taught our boy, Jonathan and the 2 girls, were top-rate people, you know, first-class teachers, and they benefited from that.
You've obviously, as I said before, have moved around quite a lot. Mm. Where are your roots?
Well, I look back with nostalgia to South Wales, but I think if I went back to South Wales now, I'd be perhaps not only disillusioned, but feel sort of out of water, you know, completely out of my depth there. The area is, I mean, the coal mines no longer operate. Where I used to live, you could spit down the pit, you know, nothing like that happens. So I think Connie and I feel these are our roots around here now. This is where our children grew up. This is where we ourselves have participated in the life of the town.
What makes a place, makes you feel that your roots are there? What is it about a place?
You're talking about communities, aren't you? Well, all sorts of things make a community. Poverty sometimes does. Poverty unites people. And that certainly happened in South Wales, and I think it happened in East London. That doesn't happen in Stevenage.
The thing that brought Stevenage together in the early days was fighting for the things that we felt a community should have.
Yes.
Good schools, nursery schools,
yes,
hospitals.
When the town was growing, certainly it was the campaigns that united us. I mean, people that were active in the town in those days and have moved out, we see from time to time. Somebody lives up in Ashwell, for instance, and they sort of go over the things that we did, you know, all the campaigns we were involved in, the arguments we had, and all that kind of thing. That isn't around at the moment. On the other hand, what we feel is that the community centres in Stevenage, there's about half a dozen of them, are doing a pretty good job in sort of keeping the community together. I mean, the one in Bedwell, we go up once or twice a week and have lunch there. And there's a very nice feeling around, you know, everybody's friendly and so forth. And I think that's partly due to this community centre, which has a range of activities there. You can book a room for a wedding. You can have a religious service there if you want. Table tots, elderly people, all that kind of, all goes on in the community centre, and it's fairly central to the neighbourhood as well. So people, I think, know that if there's any difficulty or any service they need, they can get it, or they can get information about it from the centre.
Do you think that a sense of belonging is important to you?
Oh yes, yes.
Why?
Well, otherwise you're a sort of a, you know, you're a loose, not a loose cannon, but I mean, unbelonging. I mean, the family is the basic thing where you belong to, isn't it? You know, and people that have no or dysfunctioning families, which we used to call problem families, I think feel misfits in society. Yeah. I think Stevenage is reasonably mature now, but we've still got a long way to go.
When you look to the future now, to the Millennium,
Yeah.
what does the Millennium mean to you?
Well, like Connie, I think it's a religious festival. That's our chief view about the Millennium. I would like to see some jolly good choirs there, particularly Welsh male voice choir.
Funny that.
Yeah, but have you ever heard a good male voice choir?
Mm.
Well, nothing like it, is there?
So you say it's essentially a religious ceremony, a religious.
Yes, I mean,
thing.
okay, religious ceremony is the focus of it, but plenty of other things going on as well. Let people enjoy themselves. Yes.
How do you think we should mark the Millennium?
Oh, well, I'm not an expert at that. You must ask Mr. Peter Mendelsohn.
Within the community, though.
Well, I think there ought to be something, yes. I mean, we could do something in Stevenage. I mean, we've got a very good leisure centre here with a very good theatre, very well-equipped theatre. There are plenty of events that could be put on there, I think.
You think that that's the way to mark it rather than religious services?
Well, the churches, I hope, will be doing their bit towards it. And maybe there should be some... I mean, St George's Church is the biggest one in Stevenage, that's the Anglican one. Perhaps there should be some sort of a united service there. But there is a body called Churches Together in Stevenage, which can plan for that kind of thing, which has representatives from all the churches, including, by the way, we have a very unique, I think, the only kind of church in the country here in Stevenage. That's the Egyptian Coptic Church, which I've never heard of outside Egypt before.
St Michael's.
St Michael's, yeah, they've recently opened a church in the other side of the town. I don't know how many people they get there, but apparently it's the only one in England.
The Millennium itself, what do you think it means for society?
A pretty good time having a bash, I should think. Yes.
And what about the actual Millennium? Not necessarily New Year's Eve
Well,
1999.
there are a lot of how shall I say, freaky people about, aren't there? I'm sure they'll think of having sort of witches celebrations and all that kind of thing, or those like from some of the outlandish religious sects who think that the end of the world is coming on midnight of the year 2000. Probably there'll be a bit of that going on somewhere.
But what about for society as a whole, for the world, for the future? What do you hope for the future?
Well, I would hope that we can re-establish the sense of community as a nation, not only as neighbourhoods, but as a nation. We've lost that, I think, somehow. And I think we've lost it because, as Connie was saying, the security of employment has disappeared for nearly everybody these days. women have to work in order to make ends meet. So family life is disrupted. Somehow, I mean, Richard Tawney, a very distinguished economic historian at the London School of Economics, I think once wrote that the first duty of government is to create a sense of community, that we belong as a nation. And that's no kind of aspersion on other nations, but we are a nation. And I think somebody was saying on the radio this morning, the French feel themselves as a nation, the Germans feel themselves as a nation. We don't particularly, and we want to re-establish that. Now, how they do that, that's the job from Mr. Blair and others, not me.
But you think that's the one thing that you'd like to
I
see
think
in
so.
the future?
I think so, yes. We need to be seen as a nation. And the Scots want their independence. Well, I'm not sure it's going to be a good thing in the long term for them, but okay. But, you know, we need to establish a sense of community which joins us together.
I think people need to have a pride in themselves and in their country. And I don't feel, and I may be wrong here, that young people have a pride in Britain at all. You see them waving their flags at the prom. In fact, I wrote a poem about it, and I want to send it out to Colin Davis, the conductor. They wave their flag, and everybody, and the poor Union Jack feels so proud, but he's forgotten the next day. He's the Union Jack.
Don't you think there was a huge sense of nationalism during the World Cup this year? There was a massive sense of it. There was flags being sold.
Yes, but it was diffused the next day. It's like when they waved the flags at the prom. They will wave it for the prom, they will wave it for the World Cup. The two extremes, but they were there and it was good. But you see, they don't seem to have a pride. I don't get the sense of people being proud of Britain and their country. When I was at school, when I was young, we were born Empire Day. We had to sing songs for Scotland, Ireland, Wales, everything, and we were enjoyed.
But the sense
British,
of nationalism and sense of pride in that way is celebrated in Wales and in Scotland, and not in the same way as England.
No,
do you think it's an English problem then, or
it may well be? But I mean, I'm very.
how do we define our nation?
Well, I feel
English people are rather disparaging of their own country.
That's right.
Yes.
I mean, I'm very proud the Scots are hoping to get there, and the Welsh, and I hope they all keep their languages and their culture like the Asians do in this country. But for some unknown reason, I always try to put a flag out on St George's Day. But
There's the clock again.
nobody seems, and I wear the rose, but it doesn't mean anything to be English or British. I'm proud, I'd like to be proud of the things that our country do in the way of justice and caring for humanity, no matter who they are. And if we could have that, maybe people would be proud of those things. Maybe we're not giving the young people anything to be proud of. I don't know.
But the show of nationalism, the great show of nationalism that I've seen over the last few years has certainly been the World Cup, you know, and at the Olympics and things like that. Those are the national focal events.
But it's a focus. It's not there permanently.
Maybe the show of it isn't there permanently.
I don't know. Maybe you're
But
right,
you
Jane. I
need a
don't know.
manifestation of something to be able to show it. Like I remember 1977 with the Jubilee. That was an enormous celebration of nationalism.
that was.
But you see, I think, I don't know whether I'm right about this, but historically, you see, we have declined in our influence as a world power since, I would think, 1914. I mean, our empire has become independent and so forth, so we are now just a small island, or a collection of islands. Whether that has sort of an effect on people, because we no longer, you know, the world is not, you know, painted red as it, you know, all over the place. It's
I mean, to me, that doesn't really matter. I think what I feel very concerned about, I think part of the problem is that you've got the industry in Britain is owned by a lot of people outside. You've got the Japanese making cars, you've got the Germans making cars, and they're bringing their culture because, you know, you can't have this kind of union if you work for Japan, and the same for Germany. And then we seem to be pulled on one side by American culture. We're being pulled on the other side by this awful common market, the EU, which I think is the most dreadful thing ever happened to Britain. But I mean, you know, we're being pulled on where does Britain, as Britain stand in all this? We're even told what size apples we can eat, what colour tomatoes. We can't, this is the last year you'll be able to put a certain sauce over your Christmas pudding. I mean, are we giving millions of pounds to there to tell them how we can eat and what laws we can have? Why can't people eat what size apple they want and what colour tomato they want? We've lost our orchard. We've lost our fishing rights. My cousin was a fisherman, and he was also the coxswain of the lifeboat in
So you're not greatly in favour of the EU then?
my one
That's the
thing,
understatement of it.
the one thing I pray for, Jane, is that we pull out before I die. And I haven't got long, I'm 80 next year, but there's got to be something happen, because my cousin was a fisherman. He was happy fishing. His sons were fishermen. And what happens? He can't fish anymore. He's now captain of a boat around Africa looking for gas, for British gas. Because other people can come in on our waters and they're quite rude about it. They've got the wrong size nets and nothing happens. How can we be proud of a country? Why don't we subsidise British industry here to go and have work?
The interesting point is that you mentioned that Europe itself, and you mentioned France. Now, France, as you said, has a great nationalistic feeling. I mean, I've lived out there, I know that it has. But yet, they are really pro-Europe. So how do you think that, it's going to fit in that way?
Yeah, but I think that maybe this is why I'm like I am, because I feel that you can be in France and be proud of your country, be pro-Europe. Well, what we've got to be proud of, because Europe is dictating more to us. I mean, I thought Europe was going to be one place together where we had similar ideals and you could vote on things. But who was it that let off those atomic bombs at the other side of in the islands near New Zealand? 3 or 4 atomic bombs let off by France, and the EU couldn't do anything about it? And these are the things that really make me cross. I go in and we all have a say on what's going on. And when they let those bombs off, then they said, well, that's the last, nobody else can do it. But they did it, but now nobody else can. And it's these discrepancies which I'm against.
You think that Britain will lose its standing or its right to govern itself then? Is that what it is?
We came in as a trading nation and we were going there for trade. We didn't go in there to lose our sovereignty, which we're doing. And we're now being told by them. And if you look at it, Jane, all over the world, the pocket wars are people wanting their identity. I mean, and small countries, Scotland, Wales, and Quebec is now back on the agenda in Canada, want to be independent. And they're all over because people want to be themselves, they want to be right, they want to trade, they want to be with other people, they want to respect other countries, but they want to feel they are what they are.
That's one of the big arguments for the ecu versus the pound, isn't it? The fact that people see that our currency as a symbol of our national identity.
That's right. And we'd already lost, was it 1972 when we went over to decimalisation. That cost this country millions, right? Now, we could spend this money on something else. I mean, we can trade with these countries. I'd be pleased with it. We can have international relationships with these countries. We could even we've got what do you call the police force abroad? We've got international police force. We have that. But to suddenly say, I'm sorry, but you can't do this. And there's so much fraud in the EU, and they've admitted it, and they can't stop it. It's too big. And they now say that they get first-class fares to travel all over Europe and to come home, but they travel third class and keep the money. Now, to me, that is gross dishonesty. Gross dishonesty. And they're open about it. It's this kind of thing that really gets me and it bugs me. If someone gave me first class fare, I said, I'm sorry, I won't be travelling first, I'll keep it, I'm only going third. That's the honest thing to do. And there's so much fraud over there, which we're paying for, and it's so big they can't stop it.
How do you feel about the single European currency?
Well, like most people, I have my doubts, I think. I mean, there's no unanimity about the benefits or otherwise of it. I mean, if you read the business section of the Times, there's contrary arguments nearly every day, about it. Whether it would be... I mean, Tony Blair says we'll go in if it benefits us. Well, I'm not sure if anybody can say what the benefits will be at the moment. I mean, how do you feel about it? An agnostic.
Well, regarding the national identity, which is I think where we started this conversation, do you think that the pound is a symbol of British identity?
Well, it is to lots of people, I think. I mean, although there are many people who wouldn't bother as long as the coins get them what they feel they're entitled to,
Because I've met a lot of people that feel that very much, that they don't want to give up the pound because it is a symbol of
Britain. It's a
British
symbol of
identity.
Britain. And the other things, we're used to seeing the Queen of the royal family on the back. But I won't be alive. But I should think in 20, 30, 40, maybe even 50 years' time, there will be wars. And you know what there'd be? There'd be the French youth, the German youth, British youth, all wanting to say, like they're doing in Quebec, we want our identity back, we don't want to belong anymore. And I think that will happen, and I think that will be sad.
You see, the main reason for the European Union being set up, or the principles behind it, was to avoid the repetition of European wars, which had devastated the world on 2 occasions. But it's gone beyond that, it seems to me. I mean, okay, yes, we want to avoid Germany and France ganging up on one another and so forth, and involving us in world wars. But the machinery of the European Union seems to be so, how shall I say, it doesn't add up at all. I mean, they've even got 2 centres where they meet. They meet in Brussels and they meet in Strasbourg, and the whole caboodle's got to move every month, you know.
Do you think that the countries are just too diverse to actually merge into one so-called union?
Well, that's not, in theory, no. Should be able to do it. I mean, we're all part of humanity, you know. And there is a bit of a, if you like, a common cultural heritage, which is European. But ours is a bit different, it seems to me, as well. I don't see why we shouldn't keep our identity. But it's the pettifogging detail of the European Union that seems to offend most people, and the corruption, particularly the common agricultural policy, which is putting millions of pounds into people's hands who never stir, you know.
Somebody said on the radio recently, the reason why the good Lord made Britain different, that's why he surrounded us by water to make sure we stayed that way. I mean, no, I am not sold on this one iota, and I think it's a betrayal of everything that I consider good and British,
well,
especially dishonesty about
I think there ought to be some way in which we cooperate.
We can have trade agreements.
Yes, trade agreements, but you see, when you come to things like what's been in the papers today about a common taxation policy, that's asking for trouble, because I think it would be appalling to try to bring together the German welfare system and ours and the French. I mean, they're all based on completely different principles, you know. Why can't we do that? I mean, there is a degree of cooperation already, isn't there? I mean, NATO is the sort of armed forces bit. Why can't we have an economic
we started off as a place for economic cooperation. I didn't want to go any even then, but I thought, okay, we can cooperate on trade, and we can do. And the other thing is, you see, it's a rich man's club, isn't it? We're going to say, okay, we can do this and we can do that. And if we go completely with our trading agreements with them, what about our developing nations in the third world, like say Zimbabwe and other places, who are trying to sell their goods to us? Are we so rich that we're now not going to help these nations to buy their goods and things like that? There's lots of questions I need to ask about the whole thing, and the salaries that we pay, and the duplication of services. I read articles in the Times, in the business section, and one day it seems to be pro-Europe, and there's the next day there's somebody who's pointing out all the problems and the difficulties. I mean, to the ordinary layperson, I mean, I'm not an economist, so I don't understand what are the advantages or disadvantages economically for having a common currency and trading and all that kind of thing. I know, I think they should have a referendum on this, and
well, there is
and
to
a lot of people, yes, but
yeah.
I think a lot of people say now it's gone too far. People say it's gone too far.
Yeah. What does your generation think about?
I think there's a very mixed view. I think depending on your background, depending on your education, depending on your personal stance, I think it's very mixed.
It is, yes.
And I think that's a general view. I think it's all very mixed.
Yeah, yes. I find out the LSE, I mean, the economists, they have different views. Yes.
I guess we'll have to wait and see. Thank you very much.